My sister Vanessa sneered across the reception hall, her voice loud enough for the entire wedding to hear. "Clara, you've always been the family's greatest failure." The words pierced through me, not because they were new, but because they were spoken in front of strangers, in front of my daughter Lily. They thought their cruelty would silence me. They thought excluding my child from the wedding would humiliate me into submission. But what they didn't know was that silence is not surrender. It is strategy. And when Christmas came, I made one small, deliberate change that tore their perfect world apart. I have lived most of my 34 years in the shadow of responsibility. My name is Clara Morgan, and long before my daughter Lily was born, long before my sister Vanessa learned to sneer at me with that perfect smile of hers, I was already carrying a burden no child should have been forced to bear. When our father died suddenly, I was only 19. A scholarship letter lay unopened on my desk the night he collapsed in the kitchen. I had dreamed of studying literature, of building a life outside the crumbling walls of our small home. Instead, I folded that letter neatly, tucked it into a drawer, and went to work at the diner down the street to keep food on the table. Vanessa was just 13 then, bright, spoiled, and quick to cry until she got her way. My mother, overwhelmed with grief, poured what little energy she had left into pampering Vanessa. It was easier that way, I suppose. Someone had to be the strong one, and that someone was me. I paid her tuition when she wanted private lessons. I worked double shifts so she could join her friends on field trips. Every time life handed me a choice between myself and her, I chose her. And each time, a piece of me disappeared quietly into the sacrifice. Years later, those sacrifices became the foundation of who I was. Not Clara, the woman with dreams, but Clara, the sister who carried everyone else. By the time Lily was born, my identity was no longer my own. I was a mother, yes, and I cherished it. But I was also still the sister who patched Vanessa's world together. Sometimes, late at night when Lily was asleep, I would wonder if giving up everything had been worth it. Then I'd see her little chest rise and fall, steady and safe, and I would tell myself it had to be. One Tuesday evening, Lily and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. She was 15 now, tall and graceful in a way that reminded me painfully of Vanessa when she was younger. Except Lily's eyes carried a warmth Vanessa's never had. We shared spaghetti on chipped plates, laughter filling the cracks in our small apartment. These quiet dinners were our sanctuary. No audience, no expectations, just us. For those moments, I almost forgot the sting of what I had given up. Almost. "If you could do it all over again, Mom," Lily asked suddenly, twirling pasta around her fork, "would you still have given up college for Aunt Vanessa?" Her innocence cut deeper than she realized. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes love means carrying more than your share, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean the burden is fair." My words hung heavy in the air, a confession I had never spoken aloud before. Vanessa, meanwhile, had never struggled. At 28, she floated through life on charm and beauty, drawing attention wherever she went. Mother still looked at her as though she were the sun, blinding herself to the shadows Vanessa cast. When she announced her engagement to Andrew Collins, the only son of an influential family with more money than compassion, the house buzzed with celebration. Mother cried tears of joy. Neighbors gossiped about how Vanessa had made it. And me? I smiled politely, clapping at the right moments, hiding the ache in my chest. Vanessa didn't hide her disdain for me anymore. She didn't have to. At family dinners, she would laugh about her expensive wedding plans while glancing at my second-hand shoes. She joked about how not everyone can marry up. Once, in front of Andrew, she leaned close and whispered, "You'll come to the wedding, won't you, Clara? Someone has to make sure the champagne doesn't run out." The way Andrew chuckled told me she had been mocking me long before that night. What stung most wasn't the words, but the truth beneath them. In Vanessa's eyes, I was not her equal. I was the help, the background character in her grand story. She had forgotten, or perhaps she had chosen to forget, that it was my money, my years of labor, that had carried her through college when our mother's wallet was thin. She never repaid me, not with gratitude, not even with acknowledgement. It was as if my sacrifices had been erased, rewritten as though Vanessa's success had bloomed from nothing but her own brilliance. I tried to remind myself that bitterness solves nothing, but when I watched Vanessa drape herself in luxury, her ring catching the light as she raised her glass, I felt the old resentment tighten in my chest. I had built a life out of survival, brick by brick, while she floated on clouds I had paved, and now, standing on the brink of her lavish wedding, she wanted me to play the role of servant again. That night, after another family gathering where Vanessa's laughter rang louder than everyone else's, I returned home to Lily waiting at the door. She hugged me tightly, sensing the storm I hid behind my smile. "You're not a failure, Mom," she whispered. Her voice carried more strength than my entire family's approval ever had. I kissed the top of her head, closing my eyes. For her, I had endured everything, but for the first time in years, I wondered, maybe enduring was not enough anymore. And somewhere in the silence of that thought, a seed was planted, a seed that would grow into something Vanessa could never predict. If you were me, if you were Clara, would you regret giving up your entire youth for someone who turned their back on you? Or would you hold on to that sacrifice as the weapon they never saw coming? The invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope embossed with gold letters, the kind that immediately signaled wealth and grandeur. My mother handed it to me with a strained smile as if she knew something I didn't. When I opened it, I scanned the words twice before the absence hit me like a blade. My daughter Lily's name was nowhere to be found, only mine. I swallowed, trying to mask the sting. "Perhaps it was a mistake," I said softly, but my mother shook her head quickly, too quickly. "No mistake. Vanessa decided it was best. She doesn't want children ruining the elegance of the evening." "Children?" My voice cracked. "She's 15. She's family." Mother pursed her lips, her silence louder than any words. The message was clear. Don't fight this. Don't embarrass Vanessa. And then, as if rehearsed, she added, "Clara, you should understand. This is Vanessa's moment. Don't make trouble. Just be gracious like you always are." Like I always am. Those words clung to me long after I left. I remembered Lily's excitement weeks earlier when she had asked what she might wear to Aunt Vanessa's wedding. Now, I would have to tell her she wasn't welcome, not because of anything she'd done, but because her presence wasn't deemed refined enough. That evening, Lily sat cross-legged on the couch, her eyes shining as I entered. Did the invitation come? Did she write my name fancy like the others? Her smile faltered when she saw my face. I sat beside her, took her hand, and tried to steady my voice. "Sweetheart, they said the event is adults only. They think—" My throat closed, but I forced the words. "They think it wouldn't be suitable for you." Lily's shoulders slumped, the joy draining from her like water from a broken glass. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "So, I'm not good enough?" I pulled her into my arms, holding her so tightly it hurt. "Never say that. You are more than enough. More than any of them will ever be." She buried her face against me, and in that silence, I felt the weight of every sacrifice, every humiliation I had endured. They weren't just mine anymore. They belonged to her too. Later that night, as she drifted to sleep, I sat alone in the darkened living room. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the effort of restraint. They thought my silence was surrender. They thought excluding my daughter would be the end of it. But they were wrong. My silence was a beginning. The day of the wedding arrived beneath a sky painted with gold and pink, the kind of day photographers adore. Vanessa had spared no expense. The venue sparkled with chandeliers, floral arrangements spilling over tables like fountains of wealth. Guests in glittering gowns and tuxedos milled about, sipping champagne as if their lives depended on appearing elegant. I walked in alone. Every step felt heavier without Lily at my side, but I held my head high. A hostess guided me to my seat with a practiced smile. When she pointed, I froze. My chair was tucked behind a pillar near the restrooms, a place so far removed it might as well have been outside. Even the waitstaff, bustling past with trays, seemed to command more dignity. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap as whispers floated from nearby tables. "Is that the sister?" someone murmured. "The single mother?" "Poor thing." Laughter rippled, polite but cruel. And then came Vanessa, radiant in white lace, her smile dazzling as cameras flashed. She floated past the tables like royalty, pausing only when her gaze landed on me. Her lips curled into that familiar smirk, and she leaned ever so slightly toward Andrew. Loud enough for the guests around us to hear, she declared, "See, darling, I told you she'd come. She can't resist clinging to scraps of family pride, even though she's always been the failure." The words sliced through the air, sharper than the diamonds glittering on her wrist. Guests chuckled nervously, some pretending not to hear, others nodding as though they had always known. My face burned, but I forced myself still, my composure the only shield I had left. Inside, though, something shifted. It wasn't rage. Not the wild, consuming kind. It was colder, steadier. It was the realization that humiliation could be a weapon if wielded at the right time. As Vanessa moved on, basking in the adoration of her new family, I felt eyes on me. Not mocking, not pitying, studying. Across the room, at one of the tables reserved for the groom's business partners, a man watched me intently. His suit was tailored to perfection, his presence commanding without a word. Our gazes locked for the briefest of moments, and in that glance, I sensed something strange. Recognition. Who was he? And why did his eyes linger not with disdain, but with intent? All around me, laughter and music swelled, but my mind clung to that single look. I didn't know it then, but that moment would unravel everything Vanessa believed she controlled. The man whose eyes had lingered on me earlier did not remain seated for long. As the laughter and music carried on, he rose with a quiet confidence, weaving through the crowd as if the entire hall parted for him. When he finally stopped at my table, my forgotten corner by the restrooms, every head nearby turned. He extended his hand. "Clara Morgan?" His voice was deep, calm, but carried the weight of someone who was used to being heard. I blinked, startled. "Yes?" "Julian Hayes." He gave a polite smile, the kind that didn't reach his calculating eyes. "It's been a long time." The name struck a distant chord, though I couldn't place it immediately. But before I could respond, he pulled out the empty chair beside me, ignoring the scandalized whispers from those who saw a man of his stature sit in such a lowly place. The whispers grew louder when, a moment later, he stood again, turning toward the head table where Vanessa and Andrew sat in triumph. His voice carried easily across the hall. "I came here tonight with Clara." The room seemed to freeze. Forks paused mid-air. The string quartet stumbled into silence. Dozens of eyes snapped toward me, the woman they had relegated to the shadows. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible. I was center stage. Vanessa's jaw dropped, her painted smile cracking into disbelief. "You came with her?" she asked, her voice faltering. Julian's expression never wavered. "Yes, I wouldn't be here otherwise." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The same guests who had mocked me minutes ago now exchanged wide-eyed looks. The sudden shift was palpable, as though the very air in the room had changed texture. And there I sat, my pulse racing. My humiliation hadn't been erased, but something new was unfolding, something I couldn't quite understand. Why me? Why now? I'll ask you this. If a powerful stranger suddenly stood at your side in the moment you felt most abandoned, would you trust him? Or would you suspect another trap? Julian's presence ignited a wave of confusion among the guests. Even Andrew, who had lounged smugly all evening, shifted uncomfortably. He leaned toward Vanessa, whispering harshly, but not quietly enough. "Do you know him? Why is he saying that?" Vanessa forced a laugh, brittle and sharp. "Clara must have begged him for sympathy. Don't take it seriously." But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Julian, hearing her, turned his gaze to the groom. "Andrew Collins, isn't it? I believe your family and mine have crossed paths in more than one boardroom." That single sentence detonated across the room like a silent bomb. Andrew paled. His father, seated nearby, straightened abruptly, his glass of wine trembling in his hand. Vanessa's smile faltered further. You're... That Julian Hayes? Julian inclined his head, unbothered by the sudden reverence. Hayes Financial. Yes, I've been in discussion with your father-in-law about an acquisition. We're very close to signing. The hall erupted into hushed murmurs. Hayes Financial was not just a company, it was a powerhouse. And now the man at the helm of that empire was declaring in front of everyone that he was my companion. The shift was immediate and grotesque. Where moments ago guests had turned their backs, now they leaned forward with eager smiles, some even standing to offer greetings. Chairs scraped as people clamored for proximity, their faces eager, desperate not to be left on the wrong side of this new revelation. I felt sick at the speed of their transformation. The same mouths that had whispered failure now spoke my name with sudden warmth. Nothing had changed about me, only the perception of who stood beside me. Vanessa tried to recover, rising from her seat and approaching us with a practiced laugh. Julian, what a surprise! We didn't realize you were close with Clara. She never mentioned it. Her attempt at control was almost pathetic. Julian met her smile with one of his own, sharp, cool, and devastating. There are many things Clara doesn't mention. She's not one to boast, a rare quality. I watched Vanessa's confidence waver, her cheeks flushing. For the first time in years, I saw her without her armor of superiority. Just a woman caught in a storm she hadn't predicted. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. Every eye followed as I tucked my clutch under my arm and looked at Vanessa squarely. Congratulations on your wedding, I said simply, my voice calm, steady. May it be everything you hoped for. Then, without waiting for her reply, I turned and walked toward the exit. Julian fell into step beside me, unhurried, as though this had been his plan all along. Behind us, voices buzzed, confusion, shock, curiosity. Vanessa's laughter rang hollow in our wake, her mask crumbling piece by piece. Outside, the night air was cool, a relief against my heated skin. I exhaled, realizing how tightly I had been holding myself together. Julian looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. That was unnecessary, I murmured, still reeling. On the contrary, he said, his tone deliberate. It was very necessary. We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the wedding muffled behind the doors, and in that silence I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet. Julian Hayes hadn't just appeared to rescue me. No. There was a reason he had chosen this moment, this stage, this humiliation to intervene. What reason could a man like that have for standing by me? The night after the wedding, I lay awake replaying every moment in my head, the sneer on Vanessa's face, the humiliation I had endured, and then the way everything shifted the moment Julian Hayes spoke my name. I could still feel the weight of his presence beside me, steady and immovable, as though he had been waiting for that exact moment to step in. But why me? Why now? The answer came the next afternoon. Julian called, his voice measured and polite, asking if we could meet. Against my instincts, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe far from the glitter of the Collins estate, the kind of place where no one would care who he was. He arrived without bodyguards, without the sharp armor of wealth. Just a man in a tailored suit, his eyes clear, his posture relaxed. You don't remember me, do you? He asked after we ordered coffee. I searched his face, the strong lines and the calm authority. Should I? He smiled faintly. 15 years ago, you were tutoring at the community center. A scrawny kid who could barely afford books showed up every week. You taught him math, English, even how to fill out scholarship applications. That boy was me. The memory hit like a jolt. A boy with threadbare clothes, eyes hungry not for food, but for a chance. I remembered staying late after my shifts to help him with essays, pushing him to believe he could do more. My throat tightened. Julian, that was you? Yes. His voice softened, but his gaze remained intense. I wouldn't be where I am without those nights. You gave me a chance when no one else believed I had one. I built Hayes Financial on that chance. I sat back, stunned. All those years I had wondered if my sacrifices had mattered, if my quiet endurance had changed anything. And here he was, living proof that they had. He leaned forward, his tone sharper now. When I heard your sister was marrying into the Collins family, I considered sending a polite gift and ignoring the event. But then I learned how she treated you, how she excluded your daughter. That wasn't just cruel. That was erasing the very person who had given her everything. My chest burned with a mix of shame and anger. I didn't need saving, I said quietly. Julian shook his head. No, Clara. You needed recognition. And more than that, you need leverage. Which is why I didn't just stand by you last night. I want you to stand beside me. Not as a charity case, as a partner. I stared at him. Partner? He nodded. You have strength they underestimate. Loyalty, discipline, the kind of qualities money can't buy. Hayes Financial is expanding into education initiatives, scholarships, mentorship programs. Who better to lead that branch than the woman who once did it without a dollar to her name? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The offer was more than validation. It was opportunity. It was proof that my years of sacrifice weren't wasted. But as his words sank in, I felt another shadow creeping behind me. Vanessa. She would never accept this. The same sister who couldn't bear my presence at her wedding would never survive seeing me rise. And that thought, her envy, her desperation, sent a shiver down my spine. Across town, the storm was already brewing. By the next morning, whispers spread like wildfire. Guests from the wedding told the story again and again. Clara Morgan, the forgotten sister, wasn't a failure after all. She had once changed the life of a boy who became a giant in the business world, and now he had appeared, unannounced, to stand beside her. The Collins family heard it too. Andrew's father, calculating as always, began asking questions. Who was this Clara? Why had Vanessa hidden her so thoroughly? What else had she lied about? The doubt crept in like poison, eroding the shine of Vanessa's new marriage. Vanessa, frantic, called me late at night. Her voice, usually dripping with superiority, was ragged with fear. Clara, you have to help me. People are saying things that make me look weak, like I depend on you. You can't let this spread. Please, don't humiliate me like this. I listened in silence, the same silence she had mistaken for surrender so many times before. My fingers tightened around the phone, but I said nothing. When she realized I wouldn't answer, her voice cracked into a sob. Please, you can't destroy me, not after everything I've built. But I did not reply. I simply ended the call, because she was wrong. I didn't have to destroy her. She was already unraveling, thread by thread, the moment the truth touched the light. And still, I knew this wasn't the end. My silence was not the final blow. No, the storm she feared had not yet arrived. That storm would come when the family gathered again, when the illusions of power and perfection were most fragile. It would come at Christmas, and when it did, nothing she clung to would survive it. The cracks in Vanessa's perfect life widened quickly. Within 2 weeks of the wedding, whispers had reached every corner of the Collins empire. The story spread in newspapers and on business blogs. Bride who humiliated her sister now faces business fallout. Some articles were merciless, painting a vivid picture of how the golden child had built her image by stepping on the shoulders of the sister she had dismissed as a failure. The consequences were immediate. The Collins family, wary of scandal and even warier of losing deals, quietly withdrew from negotiations with Julian's company. Andrew's father made the call himself, his voice tight with anger. We can't afford entanglements right now. The Hayes partnership is off the table. Andrew's business, which had leaned heavily on that merger, began to falter. Projects stalled, investors pulled out, and within weeks, the once confident groom was sitting in offices filled with unanswered calls and lawyers circling like vultures. What had been a celebration of wealth and power turned into a slow bleed of reputation and cash. The press devoured it. Headlines were ruthless. From vows to losses, Collins Air faces collapse. But the most devastating were the human interest stories, the ones that highlighted me. The forgotten sister, Clara Morgan, who once paid for Vanessa's education, now finds herself vindicated. The media didn't ask for my comments, but the narrative was clear. Arrogance had a price, and Vanessa was paying it. While the Collins family scrambled, life in my small apartment was quieter, softer. Lily and I decorated for Christmas with secondhand ornaments and strings of lights that blinked unevenly but cheerfully. She laughed as we untangled tinsel, her joy unspoiled by the ugliness beyond our walls. For once, I let myself breathe. "Do you think they'll come, Mom?" she asked one evening as we baked cookies, flour dusting our counter. I smiled faintly. "They'll come. Curiosity is stronger than pride, and they won't be able to resist seeing what I've planned." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't press. She trusted me, perhaps more than I trusted myself. And in that trust, I found a strange peace. But beneath that peace, something stirred, a quiet resolve. Because I knew that the Christmas dinner I had invited the family to would not be just a meal. It would be a reckoning. When the night came, snow dusted the streets, softening the edges of the city. My apartment, though modest, glowed with warmth. I had prepared the table carefully, mismatched plates polished to shine, candles flickering, and at the head of the table the seat of honor. Not for Vanessa, the bride who thought herself queen. Not for my mother, who had always chosen favorites. No. This seat bore a handwritten card with Lily's name. The doorbell rang, and one by one they arrived. My mother, stiff and uncertain. Vanessa, eyes red-rimmed despite the heavy makeup. Andrew trailing behind, his arrogance dimmed. They looked around my small home as though it were foreign territory. Julian arrived last, his presence filling the room with a calm authority. He greeted me warmly, then shook Lily's hand with a smile that made her beam. As he sat beside me, the room shifted once more, just as it had at the wedding. Everyone straightened, their eyes darting between us, calculating. Dinner began awkwardly, the clink of cutlery louder than conversation. Vanessa tried to seize control, laughing too loudly, talking over others, but her voice trembled. At last, she couldn't bear the silence. "So this is what you've been waiting for, Clara? To show us up at your little dinner?" I didn't rise to the bait. I simply gestured to the card at the head of the table. "That seat belongs to Lily. Tonight, she is the guest of honor." All eyes turned to my daughter, who blushed but held her chin high. Vanessa's face twisted, fury warring with disbelief. "Her? She's just a child." "Not too young for dignity," Julian interjected smoothly. His gaze swept the table. "And not too young to inherit her mother's strength." My mother shifted uncomfortably, her eyes flickering between me and Vanessa. For the first time, she didn't defend her youngest. Vanessa snapped. "Don't let her fool you. Clara has always lived off others. She's nothing but a parasite, feeding on pity." Her words rang sharp in the small room, desperate and venomous. Julian didn't flinch. From his briefcase, he pulled a folder and slid it across the table. "These are the records from when Clara funded Vanessa's tuition, years before the Collins family ever knew her name. Bank transfers, receipts. Proof that the so-called parasite was the backbone of this family long before you decided she wasn't good enough." The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's eyes widened as she snatched the papers, her hands trembling. This is twisted." "Twisted," Julian cut in calmly, "is rewriting history to erase the sacrifices of others." Tears spilled down Vanessa's cheeks. My mother pressed her lips together, shame flickering across her face. "And me?" I sat quietly, watching the truth unravel in the place where lies had once ruled. The dinner ended not with shouting, but with silence, the kind that follows a storm, when nothing is left standing in its path. And from that moment forward, the balance of our family was changed forever. In the days after Christmas, the silence from my family was almost louder than their usual judgment. For the first time in years, my phone didn't buzz with demands, guilt-laden requests, or passive-aggressive remarks. There was only quiet, and in that quiet, I discovered something I had long forgotten: peace. I sat across from Lily at breakfast one morning, watching her spread jam on toast with an ease that reminded me she was no longer my little girl, but a young woman coming into her own. She caught me staring and tilted her head. "What?" I smiled softly. "I was just thinking. I won't let you live the way I did. Always silenced, always carrying burdens that aren't yours." She reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. "You don't have to tell me, Mom. I know. I'm proud of you." Her words broke something inside me, but it wasn't pain this time. It was relief. For years, I had tried to protect her by swallowing every insult, every betrayal. But now she was old enough to see me for who I really was. Not a failure, not a servant, but a woman who had endured and finally learned to draw the line. Later that week, I met Julian at his office. The skyscraper stretched high above the city, glass gleaming in the winter sun. I felt small stepping into its lobby, but as I rode the elevator up, I reminded myself, this was not charity. This was partnership. Julian welcomed me with the same calm authority he had shown at the wedding. "Clara," he said, gesturing toward the expansive view of the city, "it's time to start building something that belongs to you." Together, we reviewed plans for an education initiative under Hayes Financial: scholarships, mentorships, programs for underprivileged students. The work I had once done unpaid, unseen, now had resources, recognition, and a future. For the first time, I wasn't just supporting someone else's dreams. I was building my own. When I returned home that evening, Lily greeted me at the door with open arms. "How was it?" she asked eagerly. I hugged her tightly. It was the beginning of something new, for both of us. That night, as snow fell softly outside our window, we curled up on the couch watching old movies and eating the cookies we had baked. It wasn't luxury, but it was happiness. And in that simple joy, the audience of life, the relatives who had once judged, the world that had once mocked, faded away. Meanwhile, Vanessa's world unraveled. Without the Collins merger, Andrew's business collapsed further. The financial strain carved cracks into their marriage, and soon those cracks split wide open. Arguments spilled into public view. The glamorous couple who had been paraded across magazines after their wedding was now fodder for gossip columns. Collins' marriage in trouble. Sources cite money, betrayal, and family scandal. Vanessa tried to maintain her old image, posting smiling photos, throwing small gatherings. But fewer and fewer people showed up. The invitations that once glittered with gold embossing went unanswered. Friends who had clung to her shine drifted away, unwilling to sink with her ship. One evening she showed up at my apartment. Her hair was messy, her eyes swollen from crying. Lily opened the door, startled, before I appeared behind her. "Clara," Vanessa whispered, her voice broken. "Please. I didn't mean for things to go this far. I thought I was protecting myself, protecting my image. I never wanted to destroy everything." I looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the girl she used to be, the one who had once clung to me after our father's funeral, the one I had worked double shifts to protect. But then I remembered Lily's face when she asked if she wasn't good enough, the humiliation at the wedding, the years of being treated as less than human. "I won't let my daughter endure what I did," I said firmly, "and I won't pretend your cruelty didn't happen. You wanted me small, invisible, but I'm not anymore." Her lips trembled, and she reached out as if to touch me, but I stepped back. Lily, standing tall beside me, slipped her hand into mine, a silent reminder of who truly mattered. Vanessa left that night without another word. I didn't stop her. I didn't scream or gloat, because revenge, I realized, wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was simply living well while the ones who hurt you collapsed under the weight of their own choices. In the months that followed, life blossomed in ways I had never imagined. The initiative with Julian gained momentum, drawing attention and praise. Lily thrived in school, her confidence growing as she watched me step into my power. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Not because my family had changed, but because I no longer needed their validation. Vanessa remained a cautionary tale. Her once bright star dimmed. She lived with the consequences she had crafted, trapped in a cage of her own arrogance. As I sat with Lily one spring evening, watching the sunset, she asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive Aunt Vanessa?" I looked at her, then out at the fading light. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't yelling or punishing. It's letting people live with the emptiness they created for themselves. And I'll ask you now, as you've walked with me through this journey, if you were me, would you forgive Vanessa? Or would you let silence be the final answer?